Welcome back to the Succeed with Dyslexia YouTube channel. In this series, we discuss news and topics that go on in the dyslexic community. So make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here are the topics that we're going to cover in this episode. Richard Branson's trip into space upon the Virgin Galactic. Afterwards, our content coordinator Vicki Thomas and her interview with Joe North, who is the author of Shine Books. And lastly, Julia Clowder's conversation with Shae Wissell, founder of the Dear Dyslexic Foundation. We'd also like to show a quick video for our campaign, Go Red for Dyslexia.
We often associate the colour red with mistakes, corrections, disapproval, and crossings out. It's time to change the narrative and take back the feelings of shame and low self-esteem that so many learners with dyslexia feel. That's why, this Dyslexia Awareness Month, we want you to go red for dyslexia. We're taking back the colour red's meaning to promote dyslexia awareness on an international scale. We want to make red something we're proud of, inspired by so many amazing parent-led associations working around the world. Will you join us?
Billionaire Sir Richard Branson successfully reached the edge of space on board the Virgin Galactic rocket plane VSS Unity that he and his team had been developing for the best part of 17 years. Sir Richard isn't the first person with dyslexia to take a brief trip into the cosmos. There have actually been a number of neurodiverse professional astronauts. Scott Kelly, the first American to spend a year in space, has ADHD and often speaks out about it. Branson returned to Earth just over an hour after leaving the ground and described the short space sojourn as the experience of a lifetime. Since embarking on a civilian spaceflight program, Virgin Galactic have been exploring the idea of the edge of the atmosphere above the planet as a tourist destination for almost 2 decades. And it's fun to think, even if for only a moment, that one day we might be able to see the stars close up. Up next, Vicki Thomas's interview with Joe North, the author of Shine Books.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vicki, and I'm a member of the Succeed with Dyslexia team. Today, I'm joined by Joe North, who is the author of Shine Books, a series of books which are helping to normalise a range of special educational needs conditions within society. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining today. Can I just start off by asking you the inspiration behind creating Shine Books?
Yeah, so traditionally, I'm a teacher. So the inspiration for me for the book, so I primarily teach older children, so 16 plus, used to teach 11 to 16 as well. And just for me, the kind of lack of understanding they had around really common conditions such as dyslexia or OCD, autism, like really astounded me. And just at that late stage, they're just sort of lack of knowledge around it, and that the students who did have the conditions kind of felt embarrassed by them. That really kind of highlighted to me that if they're struggling, with understanding and dealing with it at that age, I felt that something really needed to be done at a much younger age, just to kind of normalise the conditions from the get-go, to include it, in vocabulary for sort of 5, 6, 7-year-olds, just to get them talking about it, and then also to allow children to actually have characters that they can relate to. And to sort of, I just think there's such a gap in the market that we really don't represent these characters enough and have kind of enough awareness about removing the stigma for the conditions.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I suppose it's one of them where you kind of want children to realise early that, and to normalise it, so that when they do get to teenagers later on, that there's not stigma there, and that they can feel open about themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And so often you get, obviously within a school, you'll have to adapt a lesson maybe for them, or, someone with dyslexia may need a different coloured paper, or they may need longer time to do a certain assessment. So it's not that you want, I don't want it to be hidden in the class, but if students aren't used to seeing these kind of things, then when the student with dyslexia is given the different tools to help them, it's kind of really, everyone's staring at them and it's all, what are they doing? Why have they got that? Whereas I think if we, like you said, we just remove that stigma, and it's just part of their learning, then, they're no better or worse than anyone else in the class, but they just might need to do things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, exactly. It's really important, that is. So one of your books specifically is called Dylan, a Dog with Dyslexia, which is so around dyslexia there, is this just trying to, like we said, just create more of an understanding around there? Are you going through the different types of special educational needs?
Yeah, so it's really, and what I don't want the books to ever be is a diagnosis, because obviously symptoms can vary hugely. They can be displayed in different ways. The books for me certainly are purely just getting people talking. So I've actually got a 6 and a 3-year-old, but kind of with my 6-year-old, I'd sort of sit down and read the books through with her, and it just generated these really natural conversations where, she'd just say, oh, what does that mean? Or why can't they read that? Or why can't they write? And it just starts those conversations. So it's just there, and it's just, really naturally then chatted through. And you don't get any of that kind of confusion around it and misunderstanding. So it's just trying to bring it in really early.
Yeah, and by broadening it like that as well, they can understand where it comes into the community and where they could fit in, or other people could, rather than trying to say to them, well, it's this and it's that. You can. And
also within all the books, so obviously, whilst they normally the characters will come up with some sort of challenge or something they find difficult, like whether it's a tricky situation or just something has to be adapted. But then throughout all of the books, it's about your friends helping you through, about seeing the different strengths that they have. So my one on autism, she's incredibly good with remembering dates and numbers. So actually, her friends love that she knows where all their birthdays are. So it's also not about, I don't want the condition to define them, but it's also about understanding that condition is part of them and they shouldn't be embarrassed or hidden from it. It's just part of their makeup. So Dylan kind of has a spelling test. He does have some extra time. He has different coloured paper, and it's all just, but then there's a sport element in it, and Dylan's actually very good at sport. So we touch on, his strengths, and actually, as children and as adults, you have to play to your strengths and what you're good at. So it really, hopefully it highlights, that there's so much else about a person other than the fact they may have dyslexia or OCD or ADHD or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's a brilliant message to get across, and it's definitely a message which is definitely gaining some traction, I think, worldwide, of inclusivity, but also that people are unique and you've got to really push and go with what you are. If you're good at this, if you're good at that, you've just got to really go for it, be positive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, brilliant message. So concede that you've mentioned your SEN experience. What did you bring from that into the creative process for creating your books?
So I think for me, it's obviously from a teaching point of view, it's knowing the different strategies and tips and techniques that can be used for different conditions. So it's kind of putting my industry experience into the actual story and what the challenge might be that they're facing. And then also kind of the personal insight I've had to it. So whether I've, dealt with a learner who's been very upset from how they felt or how they were treated, or, anything to do with their condition, and kind of taking their feelings and the experiences that I've shared with them in the classroom and, constructing that into a book to show how it's not a negative and how it can be changed, but also addressing that there are points where they are going to feel vulnerable or they're going to feel upset or different. And again, it's not ignoring the fact that those feelings exist, because they do. But it's about, with each book, showing that it doesn't matter that they exist. It's about how we get around it and deal with the situations as and when they come. Hopefully just my kind of many years of teaching is just that real insight that I've got. A lot of my stories are very sort of loosely based on things that may have happened in the classroom, and obviously I've changed and adapted to be suitable for 5, 6, 7-year-olds. But hopefully using that actual experience and knowledge I've got around, just around my job and industry experience I've got.
Yeah, that's a really good kind of different take on it as well, from maybe like parents that are looking into books for their children, knowing that it's coming from like that kind of experience in education. They might feel like this could be a really good point for my children to get into these books.
Yeah. And also, from a mum point of view, myself, I want to always be able to have those conversations with my children. And sometimes some of the books I read with them are just, the books are so instrumental at that age of what they think about and what they want to do. And they pick up so much. So I think by including these kind of conditions for those books, it doesn't, it's not meant to be a learning book. It's that you sit down in the evening, you pick a book for bedtime, and we're chatting about Dylan, who's got dyslexia. And it's just a really natural, lovely story, but that's already starting to just get the message into our children that we're all different, and it's like embracing those differences that we've got.
Yeah, that sounds great. So your vision for the future and your books, where do you see them kind of going forward in the a wider society?
So hopefully, I really, really believe that there is a gap in the market, as I said, and I think the concept is incredible. So my vision for the future is just to get them bigger and bigger and get to a bigger platform. The dream would be to have a book for every condition. So, not only are you really then trying to tap into some conditions that don't have any awareness around them or understanding, but it's also giving children characters that they feel they can relate to. If just how lovely for a 5-year-old to pick up a book and say, oh, that's like me, or I do that, or I struggle with that. And just suddenly that having something they feel that they're not the only person. And then again, from a teaching point of view, I would love the idea that Dylan would one day be a character and can go into a school and run a workshop on dyslexia and actually go in and chat to the children and then turn it into a learning experience where the children and the teachers and the parents are really learning about it and how it can be done differently. So I'd love that avenue as well. My characters are all, I think, very lovable animals and all, quite caring, and people love the sort of cartoony features about them. So to get them as characters that, children could then chat to and stuff, I think would be really incredible. We're many moons in the future, but it would just be to normalise it and for them to be in every school and on every bookshelf at home. I just think is so important to bring these conditions to the surface. And as I said, just have them on your bookshelf next to, the Gruffalo and whatever else. And it's just that they're just books and people love reading them and sharing the characters.
Yeah, and that sounds a great vision for like we said before, like just for everything to be out there and for people to be comfortable in who they are, and going into schools and raising awareness of dyslexia and other SEN. It's only a good thing, isn't it? Raising awareness like that. So that's
I want a child to just put their hand up and say, oh, because I'm dyslexic, please could I have the different coloured paper that I use, or something, not a hushed conversation or a phone call with an embarrassed parent that they're saying, oh, don't raise don't bring him to attention, and all. Like, it's part of who they are. Like, they shouldn't have to hide. And as I said, and so often, especially with young children, you can't. And the more you try and hide things, the more children, they don't have filters. So they are just going to say it. And rather than that being an issue, if it's just an open, area that we just talk about and there is no issue and there's no stigma, then it's just you kind of remove that hushed conversations about it, which I've always really struggled with as a teacher. I just think it's, obviously if the child wants it to, then that's fine as well. But I think not feeling that they have to is really important.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely. And then also with like knowing that you might be struggling with that earlier on as well, it also has an impact later on in life. So by being able to put them provisions in place early, then going through school and everything, you're going to be doing a lot better with that extra help there going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And then each book has got, so 10% goes to a charity specific of all sales that goes to say dyslexia or to autism, to ADHD. So as a side, I'd love for that to, for them to actually do good and help these incredible charities to continue to raise money and raise awareness, and on a scale I could never dream of. But if people reading these books could help that, then it would, obviously be amazing.
That sounds brilliant. Yeah, they're a great message in them, and they're great to encourage anyone to go out and delve in and start that conversation. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for taking the time to chat with us today, Jo. It's been great to have a chat with you, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to this Succeed with Dyslexia webinar. Today I'm going to be catching up with Shae Wissell. My name is Julia Clouter, and Shae, you haven't seen us for a year, but you've had an incredibly busy year, a very pacey year with lots of change in your life. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about the work that you've been doing through Dear Dyslexic and finding out the kind of support that you've been giving over the past year. So welcome along. It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me back on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. So let's start by asking you about Dear Dyslexic. Could you tell us what that is, please?
So the Dear Dyslexic Foundation was established in 2015. We originally started with podcasts, and then we've grown into a national social enterprise with charitable status. So we work across the country running training. We also do a lot of advocacy and awareness raising. We work with government in doing that, and we provide a lot of peer support, would probably be the third most important aspect of what we do.
So peer support, who are your peers? Who is asking for support? Is it mostly ladies or students, or tell me about your people?
Our people have grown significantly over the last 5 years since I started DDF. We support mainly, our primary area of focus is young people and adults, so those 16 and over, so we don't work in the child space. We really support young people transitioning into school or higher education or into the workplace, and then supporting adults that are already at work that are needing support. I should also mention that we do research as well, which is a massive component of the work we do. And through our research, we've set up a PhD support group for people with dyslexia who are doing PhDs. It's the first of its kind in the world that we know of, and we've got 20 people globally that have joined our group recently. So we do peer support in different ways. We run support groups like the PhD one we started, and we have a closed Facebook group. We also have a 1-800 number that people can dial in and get peer support through, and then we also run mentoring programs as well, so a peer mentoring another person that has dyslexia.
It sounds like a very much needed service, and it's great to hear that you are, and that service is in so much in demand, but you are someone who has also managed and been successful in a journey through a PhD with dyslexia, and I know that you were near to completing a really important piece of work when I saw you last. So tell me what's happened with your studies and your research.
So I'm at the tail end of my research now. I've submitted one paper for publication, and we're waiting to hopefully have that sitting under review, so fingers crossed it gets published soon. And I think as a little bit selfish in starting up the PhD group, because I'm part of the group, not just as a facilitator, but also a student there to learn and listen to other people. And we're so lucky that we've got Dr. Judith Hudson supporting and facilitating that group. She does a lot of work with students with dyslexia who are doing their PhDs. So we're super lucky to have her. My research is focused on young people and adults, their mental health and wellbeing. So that's the paper we're waiting to be published now. And then the second component has been looking at their workplace experiences and their lived experience as an adult. And so at the moment I'm writing a paper from dyslexic employees' perspective of what it's like to work in an Australian workplace. And the third paper I've just started drafting is from the employer's perspective, and it possibly could be one of the first type of papers published. I haven't been able to find anything where we've had the employer giving their perspective of what it's like to work with someone with dyslexia. And my fourth one, fingers crossed it all goes well, because it takes time to write, is really around dyslexia and is it a disability or a superpower? We're having, there's so much conversation and narrative around dyslexia as a superpower, or trying to look at that strength-based approach, particularly in the workplace. And so I really wanted to get an understanding from people with dyslexia's perspectives of did they see it as a superpower or a real strength, or did they find it more of a disability? And so I'm really excited about that piece of work, and I hope to get that out by the end of this year, hopefully, fingers crossed, at least drafted, ready for publication. So nearly there.
Fingers crossed, indeed. And I should be signing up to read that, because that's an area that interests me very much as well. And I've done a little bit of work with employers and with dyslexic adults who are trying to find their way into the workplace. And you're right, there is a tension between the skills that you have as a dyslexic person, which might be bigger picture thinking or the ability to see patterns, great negotiation skills, for example, or let me just think of another one.
Normally we're very good at problem solving.
Thank you. Problem solving and connecting those dots. So those are all fabulous skills that are highly in demand. If you have someone on your team, you probably want a dyslexic person on your team who can help support you with those areas of thinking. But at the same time, there is this tension with people who often need others to perhaps enable for them, either with reading or just supporting in certain situations. So if you were speaking to somebody now who is listening to this and thinking, gosh, this could be me, what would you advise them? Who would you advise them to get in touch with and talk to?
Well, within the Australian context, normally if you're an adult, a neuropsychologist could assess you. So I think looking at options for assessments, but also just coming to us and having a chat to us to see what support's available. Not everyone wants to get an assessment, so it could be that you just need some strategies to help you manage in the workplace. For others, an assessment is really important. And we always say to people, the reason an assessment is important is then you're protected under so many different acts in the workplace, so the Discrimination Act, the Human Rights Act. And so by having that piece of paper, you're able to then get some additional, or you should be getting additional support in the workplace. And if you're not, then you're being discriminated against. So, but the challenge is, how do people fund that assessment? And that's the difficulty we're in at the moment, is we really advocate for those assessments, but when you don't have the funds, it's really challenging. So I'd suggest people just touch base with us and we can talk them through the different options available.
Thank you, Shae. That's really important information. So let's move on and talk about teacher training. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I'm aware that in the UK, newly qualified teachers are having a pretty bumpy time of it because they've not been able to get into the classroom in the UK. I'm aware that we have greater numbers of dyslexic teachers coming through into the system, which is wonderful, really great. But also that this particular period of time has presented some challenges for them too. Because they've not been able to get that mentoring and support that they would have previously had. So I wanted to ask you if you've been talking to teachers in Australia.
We have spoken to teachers, and we've spoken to parents as well around the struggles with COVID and the support needed at home for dyslexic children. What we have found recently is that we've got teachers coming out of university with their certificate, ready to work, but they have to sit a literacy and numeracy exam that's run by a different peak body. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, whether you need to do something like that. But what we're finding is there are a number of teachers that have managed to get through university, and then they go to sit this exam and they're not passing because they're struggling with their dyslexia. They're struggling because of the timing, like the time it takes to do the test. I think it's 65 pages or something long, and they've only got 2 hours to do it. And that the reasonable adjustments just aren't good enough for what they need as people with dyslexia. It's not being considered at the moment. And so we have been in conversations with ministers. We've written to the peak body in Victoria around some of the challenges that teachers with dyslexia are having. And so I think we're in for quite a long battle around how we can better support dyslexic teachers. If you've come through and you've qualified, then there must be some way that they can get additional support. And, 15 additional minutes or 20 minutes is not enough. I mean, we have to be practical and realistic. And some of these tests now are online because we're working from home. So there should be more reasonable adjustments, whether that's text-to-speech or, the ability to listen to the questions rather than having to read them. There's so many things that could be on offer that at the moment it is not. And so we're looking at how we can better support our teachers coming through that do have dyslexia when they get to that exam.
Because
and unfortunately,
otherwise you're going to exclude lots of amazing people from the teaching profession. Yeah. And you're right, in the UK, we do have the numeracy and literacy standard tests. Yes, they happen after you've committed a year of and plus of teacher training and gone through and started your first placements. I became a teacher prior to these tests happening. And I'll tell you my story briefly, and that is I'm dyscalculic. Mathematics just does not happen in my brain, really. And when I went to apply for my teacher training, I had to say, I'm so sorry, the highest grade I have achieved is a D for my GCSE maths, and I don't seem to be able to improve upon that. And I had a long conversation with a lady at the university that I trained at, which was Brunel University, and explained all of the great things that I'd been doing and how determined and passionate I was about going in to be a teacher. And she sat with me and she said, you will have to do your entry test for mathematics. However, I will provide you guidance and support before you go in and do that test. And she said, you know these things because you've been doing this at evening class, it's fine. And she just reassured me. And I got through the test and I got my pass grade. Without the support of that teacher, that professor, I don't think there's any way I would have gone into the teaching profession. And I needed that human support and kindness and understanding. Clearly, she saw something in me and she recognised that I would be a good teacher, for which I'm very grateful. But that's not an opportunity that other students are getting. I think that was quite a special moment in my career, really, where that recognition happened.
Yeah, I mean, I started I left school and wanted to become a teacher, and I couldn't even pass the end of year exam for maths and English. So I was like, something doesn't seem right. And it wasn't many years later I was diagnosed with dyslexia. But even in my master's degree, I'd failed counting twice. And I finally had this lecturer and I said to him, this is my third time. I've always had tutors. I don't know why I keep failing, but I desperately need to pass this because I'm nearly at the end of my master's degree. And I would go in every week. He would sit through and go through all the sessions with me. He spent so much time with me. And at the end, he let me do an oral exam rather than a written because I could explain the answer, but when I wrote it down, I'd get my decimal places mixed up. And he could see it. He could see me translating that information incorrectly. So he knew I knew the content. But again, that's very rare to happen. And it's outside the formal support networks. Like that was his choice because I was open and upfront at the beginning and said, this is my third time, I've struggled so much. And there's just no informal support like that anymore. And for me, it seems so wrong that you should get through your whole degree and pass it and have come out with this huge debt, and then to not be able to pass this one exam when you've got a disability, to me is disgusting. I think it's so wrong. It's not fair on so many levels. And so I think the systems need to change. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Australia to be supporting not just dyslexic teachers who are just graduated, but also across a number of industries where those people have done their degree and then they're expected to sit an exam without the appropriate reasonable adjustments or accommodations. And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Australia to better support people that have done so well in getting their degree with dyslexia. It's such a huge achievement and they should be so proud of themselves, and to be then put another barrier in front of them like this is just really, really disheartening. So I hope in time we're able to make some change around it.
The change can come, and that people recognise that if you are dyslexic and you have been successful in a course. You have done it with tenacity, and it has been tiring, and you have kept going despite feeling that perhaps sometimes the challenge is almost beyond your capacity, and that's fabulous stuff that needs to be recognised. Really, it takes a lot of skill to keep going when you're dyslexic and studying.
That brings us to the end of this episode. If you found this informative, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Once again, we'd like to thank Scanning Pens for sponsoring this episode. And as always, thank you so much for watching.